Hold it! Stop! Don't shoot!
What can I say about Silent Hill that hasn't already been said, better than I could say it? That's the problem I've been wrestling with over the past few years as people have asked me to talk about it. I mentioned the original Silent Hill games a lot, but I've never officially covered them. Now with the Silent Hill 2 remake coming out, I guess it's time to do this. I'll start by saying if you're looking for deep dives into the mythology, the development history, symbolism, and artistic inspiration, I suggest you go somewhere else. What I'm going to focus on is simply my personal experience with Silent Hill, and what it means to me. I'll go over the story as I understand it, how it plays as a survival horror series, and how I feel about the original games as they evolved. I'll be sticking to the original core series, mainly Silent Hill 1 and 2. If my fuzzy childhood memory serves me correct, in early January of 1999, on a cable channel that I believe was Tech TV, I saw a guy talking about some upcoming video games. One of the titles he mentioned was Silent Hill, a new survival horror title published by Konami, who were riding high after the smash hit Metal Gear Solid the previous year. He showed footage of someone walking around a creepy, dark elementary school swinging a pipe at demonic children, and I knew I just had to play it. I had been raised on classic horror movies like Alien and Halloween, later venturing into other genres of horror. I always enjoyed the darker side of storytelling, even in video games. The gritty, violent world of Mortal Kombat called to me much more than the colorful, light feel of Street Fighter, though I did enjoy playing Street Fighter and Marvel superheroes. I was fascinated by the demented stories told in the Twisted Metal series, the games that got me interested in the original PlayStation in the first place. And of course, there was Resident Evil, one of the first life-changing and perspective-changing games I ever played. Resident Evil was the first thing to bring my sister and I together, as we used to fight constantly. I have so many fond memories of us playing it together. It means more to me than I can express. The survival horror experience of exploring the map, saving resources, finding ways to avoid combat but also indulging in the grotesque violence of combat, and especially the camera style. Fixed camera isn't for everyone, but my sister and I really liked the cinematic presentation of the game. It felt like we were controlling a character in a movie. I talk about fixed camera a lot on this channel because it doesn't get the respect it deserves. I will always prefer a change in camera angle to direct my attention towards something important over an indicator on the screen and an objective prompt telling me what to pick up. I gush about Resident Evil on this channel for a reason. It was the first game I truly fell in love with. We were there day one to celebrate the release of Resident Evil 2, and we became enamored with the interactive horror experience, looking to get the pants scared off of us with Clock Tower and beating up on hideous monsters and nightmare creatures. They truly were the best of times. On my way out of a convenience store in January of 1999, I spotted an issue of Official PlayStation magazine. I didn't usually buy that magazine, I mainly stuck to Tips and Tricks, GamePro, and Game Informer, but I saw that the included demo disc had a playable demo for Silent Hill. Sold. As soon as I got home, I popped it in, and I was blown away. It was clunky as hell to control, but I loved where I was exploring. The town seems innocent enough, even though it is quite foggy, as you're chasing what appears to be your daughter, running away from you after the two of you were just in a car accident entering the town of Silent Hill. But as soon as you come into this area, you know something is horribly wrong. You're presented with gory imagery that you can't even make sense of. And this shot is a great example of how fixed camera angles can be used to create dramatic effects. Silent Hill gives a lot of player control to the camera as you're exploring, but it knows the perfect time to switch to a fixed angle to establish a particular mood. You may find the game showing your character from the top or from a low down angle. Camera changes like this make Silent Hill a truly cinematic experience. And it helps the action too. Frankly, I'm getting tired of every game having me stare at the back of my character's head as I shoot in front of them. I actually like seeing my character turning and shooting in different directions. It pulls me into what's happening. Getting back to the demo, you're walking down an alley as the camera pans around. It's the kind of shot you'd only get by using a crane-mounted camera in a movie shoot. Going through a door suddenly causes the whole area to go dark. Nothing seems to make sense. Your lighter sparsely illuminates the way ahead of you as the walls go from concrete to rusted metal gates. You see things that simply don't belong here. A broken wheelchair with a spinning wheel, hospital gurneys with bloody corpses in an alley, all while a faint air raid siren is heard in the background. It's heard when the nightmare world takes over in Silent Hill, and I've always wondered why they went with that particular sound. Could it be that it's just scary and makes you feel something dangerous is about to happen? Maybe it's because this is a Japanese horror game, and the siren evokes feelings of tension surrounding memories of the nuclear detonations in Japan during World War II. I'm sure some people more knowledgeable about Silent Hill history could tell me more. Entering these spaces was a terrifying experience back in the PlayStation 1 days, not just because we hadn't seen anything like it before, but because we experienced media differently back then. If someone plays or watches this exact sequence from Silent Hill 1 today, they're comfortable in front of their big screen TVs with a wireless controller 10 feet across the room, or they're screwing around on their phone while they do it, or they're listening to a podcast, or in a Twitch chat with a bunch of clowns, or watching it on YouTube on their iPhone. That's not how I and a lot of other people experienced this. We were sitting in a dark room as kids, 2 feet from our 17-inch CRT television because the controller cable only reached like an inch, and we were fully immersed in this horrific world with nothing to distract us. I'm being nostalgic, but it really was perfect. You come across a mutilated corpse strung up on a wall in barbed wire, in a space covered in blood, as creepy childlike monsters start hacking away at you with knives, grabbing you so you can't move. You're helpless, you have no weapons. What are you supposed to do? Eventually you just die, and you think, what the hell was that? How am I supposed to defend myself? And then you wake up. You find yourself in a cafe in this strange town that you just dreamed you were walking around in. How much of what happened was real? You ask a police officer for help searching for your daughter Cheryl, you pick up a gun and a map and a radio, prompting some truly awful dialogue.
What's that? Radio. What's going on with that radio?
Suddenly a winged creature flies through the window and this part of the demo ends. No combat, no exploration, no puzzles, just this trippy dream sequence and a jump scare. Demo Scene 2 puts you into the elementary school where you get to play around with the game's combat, solve puzzles, and explore the map. The demo was quite convincing, and I was there on day 1 to get my copy of Silent Hill, and I played it for hours and hours. My 3 years of Resident Evil skills gave me an edge, as I explored the maps with a keen eye, avoiding combat when possible and engaging in it from a vantage point when needed, stomping enemies to death to save ammo, a mechanic that's found in many entries in the series. Unlike Resident Evil, I was able to move while shooting, which made combat feel smoother. I explored optional areas of the map to find extra resources, and unlike Resident Evil, Silent Hill has an unlimited inventory. It's one of the big deviations from the rules of survival horror that sets Silent Hill's gameplay apart from other titles in the genre. See, there are a lot of things that make survival horror the genre that it is, and it's okay to play with and break a rule here and there, so the genre has some flexibility. Otherwise, every single game would be Resident Evil. You don't want to push it too far, or else you start heading into the action horror genre like Dead Space, or stealth horror like Outlast. And that's not to disparage those genres. Horror games don't have to be survival horror to be great. I'm just saying that there are established rules to the genre, set by Resident Evil 1, the game that introduced the term survival horror, and other games in the genre try to play with those rules to give themselves their own identity in the gameplay field. The lack of inventory management works for the design of the exploration and puzzle solving, but it unfortunately has a tendency to break the game's combat as you progress. It is of course difficulty mode dependent, but due to the ability to hold as much ammo as you want, and the inclusion of incredibly powerful melee options like the hammer that cost nothing to use, the gameplay starts shifting from conservative to action focused because you're just able to deal with everything so easily. It starts negatively affecting the horror, and I wish they'd had some kind of resource limit. Silent Hill does not have you making inventory decisions, but in the game's more balanced moments, you are making fight-or-flight combat decisions, and you're deciphering cryptic maps, exploring for important items, backtracking and planning your routes, solving item-based and riddle-based puzzles. The majority of the elements are there, and Silent Hill's change to the inventory system, as well as its unique camera perspective and emphasis on disturbing imagery and psychological horror, makes it the special experience that it is, and not just a Resident Evil knockoff as it easily could have been. Though the horror does get hurt by your character starting to feel way too powerful, Silent Hill has a way of keeping you nervous anyway. From room to room, hallway to hallway, even if I'm holding 30 shotgun shells, I'm creeped out by the look and feel of these places. The sounds and ambience, it's just so good at creating anxiety. Every environment of Silent Hill had me on the edge of my seat, dreading what was around the corner. Environments felt like believable spaces, and the transition to the nightmare world was the most chilling experience I'd ever had. You gotta realize that nothing like this had ever been seen before. We were in the early years of the first generation of 3D gaming consoles. Nothing this horrifying had ever been attempted at this point. As you're exploring those first streets in the beginning of Silent Hill after the alley dream sequence, you have a sense that something is really wrong about this place as you're seeing roads that just fall into nothingness, and the rules of reality just seem to get confused. The Silent Hill games arguably have the best map system in any survival horror game. I always love that the map updates itself with information you've learned. What doors are locked or jammed, where you saw a puzzle piece, which roads are broken. It makes a game with a lot of open running around and backtracking a much less frustrating experience because you don't have to run all the way back across the map just to realize you went to the wrong place. These are games that demand curiosity. You want to check every single door you come across and fully explore every part of every room, not just for extra ammo and health, but for critical items. Silent Hill games don't always direct you towards things you need to survive. The most notable example is the map. When you enter the school, the camera doesn't show you where the map is. You need to look around the room and find it on your own, or you'll be wandering through this place without it. In Silent Hill 2, when you enter the apartments, it's the same deal. The map is on the wall to the left, but if you just walk forward without looking around, you'll miss it and you'll end up totally lost. Solving the game's first navigation puzzle leads you to a door in a house that sees daytime turning to night. Did you trigger some kind of event, or is it just coincidence that it's happening now? This is the first moment, aside from the dream sequence, that you really get creeped out. You're not dreaming anymore, this is happening. And now you have to run in the dark through the monsters to the elementary school. The school is filled with the childlike monsters from your dream, and you gotta explore the map and solve puzzles. Your typical gameplay stuff. And one of the puzzles here just happens to be one of the best, if not the best puzzle in the series. As you push the keys, you'll notice that some of them make a clicking sound, and there's a riddle on the wall about 5 birds of black and white colors. You decipher the order of birds and their position on the piano based on the keys that click, and you get a silver medallion, one of the 2 needed to open a locked door at the base of the clock tower in the schoolyard. Hey, that's a much better piano puzzle than the one in Resident Evil Village where you can just mash random keys until you get it, right? I won't go through all the puzzles, that'll take too long, but what makes Silent Hill puzzles what they are is either their use of riddles, like this piano puzzle, or their use of seemingly random items. Why on earth would you want to pick up this pink rubber ball? Well, it's up to you to figure out that it can be used to plug the drain on the roof to cause the water to flow to a second drain, and knock a key down to the schoolyard to pick it up. My favorite examples of these puzzles are in Silent Hill 2, where you use a strand of hair and a fishing hook to get a key out of a drain, and later when you combine a wax doll, a lighter, and a horseshoe to create a handle that opens a latch in the floor. I just go nuts for this stuff. Opening the door in the clock tower leads to a creepy downward shot of your character descending a ladder, the first sign that something is wrong because you were expecting to go up. The haunting music fades out, giving way to the air raid siren you heard in the dream sequence. You're now in a dark, confined space with a metal floor. The camera pulls away from you as you walk towards it, only to sharply cut to behind you, showing a keep out sign. The siren is getting louder as you ascend a new ladder, only to come out in the exact place you were. Only now there's a giant symbol marked into the ground, and the map is all blank. You've been here, but the map says you haven't. As soon as you open a door to re-enter the school hallways, the horrific truth hits you. You're now in a nightmare version of the school. There's more danger and terrifying imagery. The map layout may be the same, but the rules are different. Previously blocked areas are now open, and some paths you used to take are now blocked off. There's new puzzles to be solved, new items to be found, and pieces of the story to be discovered. This is the Silent Hill experience. I'm not going to go through the whole game, I just wanted to walk you through what it's like to play it. You'll go to multiple areas of the town and experience the shift from regular world to nightmare world, dealing with monsters, solving puzzles, meeting weird characters, and figuring out the story as best you can. It never stops being scary, as they find brilliant ways to introduce the nightmare each time, and play with your head by subverting your expectations. I'll never forget the chill that went up my spine as I was exploring the hospital. There are no enemies yet, you're just exploring after you meet the director. You restore the power to the elevator, take it up to the second floor, but the door is jammed. Hop back in, take it up to floor 3, and it's the same story. Well, where the hell am I supposed to go if the elevator just takes me to 2 busted doors? I guess I'll go back to the first floor and see if I missed something. Oh my god, why is there now a button to the 4th floor? There is no 4th floor on this map, so why is there a button here? That's the kind of subtle, understated horror moments that just mess with your head in Silent Hill. This button is the nightmare creeping in, and the 4th floor leads to a deranged version of the hospital. Later in the game, you see the nightmare changing reality right before your eyes, and the late game map of Nowhere turns the nightmare into something that messes with your entire concept of spatial awareness, mixing together areas from previous locations. It's a compelling experience from beginning to end, and far exceeded what the development team was ordered to do. The original team at Konami that was assigned to make Silent Hill simply needed to make something to sell in the exploding survival horror genre in the wake of Resident Evil's success. But their creativity was allowed to run wild. They ended up producing a surprise masterpiece that the world never saw coming, drawing artistic and story influence from their own traditions of Japanese horror, mixed with aspects of David Lynch's Twin Peaks, Dean Koontz's Phantoms, Stephen King's The Mist, Adrian Lyne's Jacob's Ladder, and so much more. Where Resident Evil was a game about the horrors of this world, evil corporations, and mutated experiments, Silent Hill was a game about the horrors of incomprehensible nightmare worlds built on the fears and anxieties of the people who have tapped into the ancient power of a place that has a terrifying supernatural history and human history. Now, there's always debate among Silent Hill fans about how the story goes, and the storytelling in-game can be a little cryptic and vague, on top of the fact that there's concepts developed in Japanese being told in English through awkward dialogue, and this game was made as an experiment drawing influence from so many other works of fiction. Who knows how much of their own mythology they had even figured out when they made it. What I'm about to say is my interpretation of the Silent Hill story, as someone who has played the games multiple times over the decades, enjoyed lots of Silent Hill fan media, spent time reading forums and watching videos, and having conversations with other fans. I expect plenty of actuallys in the comments section, and that's fine. If I get something wrong or say something you disagree with, I expect it won't be anything that majorly impacts the enjoyment of the game or the story. There's a force in this place that has been known for many years, as far back as the Native Americans that first occupied this land. It isn't a god per se, I've never understood it that way, not in the sense of believing that a god is a certain way and does and wants certain things, because the god of the Silent Hill games takes different forms, the form that the invoker imagines God to be. That's how I've always seen it. In the first Silent Hill, the god that is born in the end is the image of God in the mind of cult leader Dahlia Gillespie, the mother of a girl who was born with psychic powers. As the leader of this cult that worships the old gods of this region, as they believe them to be according to their faith, she promises that her daughter can be used to incubate their god and bring it into the world to cleanse it by fire. Her daughter, Alessa, is regularly mocked at school by the other students, called a witch, and fears the creatures she hears about in old stories. Only 7 years old at the time that her mother performs the ritual to impregnate her with the god she'll be doomed to deliver, her psychic energy spirals out of control and causes a boiler in the basement to explode, causing a massive fire that burns down several other homes. I've also heard people say that the fire was intentional as part of the ritual, and the boiler explosion was part of a cover-up. Either way, I don't think it matters. Regardless of how it happened, Alessa ending up in the state that she's in the game was not intended. During the trauma, her soul is split in two, half remaining inside her and half manifesting itself in physical form as a newborn child. This child is discovered by our main character, Harry, and his now deceased wife, and raised by them. Alessa is taken by the cult into the basement of the local hospital and kept hidden, her body mutilated by the fire, comatose, and taken care of secretly for years by a nurse that's under the control of the director of the hospital, as he's her drug supplier and he has her hooked. Yeah, this is heavy stuff, I know. Once Harry's daughter, named Cheryl, turns 7 years old herself, the half-soul inside her is ready to merge with the half still inside the now 14-year-old Alessa. Dahlia uses a magic spell to summon Cheryl to Silent Hill, using the pain inside Alessa to cause a subconscious urge to go there with her father for a vacation, as it's known as a resort town. Obliging his daughter and now a single father, he drives her there to have a nice getaway together, but he crashes his car trying to swerve out of the way of a girl seen in the middle of the road. We later learn that this is actually an astral projection of Alessa, using her power to appear in different parts of the town to spread a symbol, the Seal of Metatron, which can be used as a sort of protection spell to fight against what her mother is trying to do, or perhaps to annihilate herself. Moving around like this is what causes the nightmare world to take over, because it's a new phenomenon. The people you meet in Silent Hill talk about the weird things happening as if they were recent, so it's not that the nightmare world has been happening for a long time, it just started. So Alessa would be causing it accidentally as she tries to stop her mother's plan. Every time she projects herself, reality changes into her nightmare. It's not that there are different realities layered on top of each other as the Silent Hill movie displays. Rather, the real world is being corrupted by Alessa's power because of the horrible nightmare she's been having for 7 years, tormented endlessly by the demonic god inside her. Everything that scares her manifests as her power corrupts the town of Silent Hill, which is why we see creatures that relate to her experiences and fears growing up. Monsters from stories she read, animals that used to scare her, the children that teased her at school, the hospital imagery from the building she's held prisoner in. Cheryl has been summoned here to join with Alessa into one being. And while Harry is making his way through town looking for Cheryl, navigating through Alessa's nightmare and battling against her monsters, he meets Dahlia, who manipulates him into doing what she wants by lying to him about the projections of Alessa he's been seeing. She says that Alessa is spreading the seal of the devil and she must be stopped. She knows that Harry has a better chance at getting close to Alessa than she does, so she gives him a powerful magic item that can be used to trap her. And when he finally does this, the power badly damages her and causes her nightmare world to basically implode in on itself and create a reality that doesn't make sense anymore. The hospital hallways lead to rooms in the elementary school, suddenly you're in the antique shop from the northeast side of town, a door on the second floor will suddenly have you on the third floor. It's purposely confusing, and there's no map. It's probably the scariest place in the game. Once you reach the end, which is found in this warped reality's hospital basement leading to Alessa's old bedroom, and you solve the final puzzle there, you're confronted by Dahlia, and now the ritual shall be completed. God will be born to cleanse this wicked planet. The god of her mother, Dahlia Gillespie, is a god of vengeance, a literal devil, Baphomet, Samael, here to burn the world and start it over. First appearing as a bright shining light of salvation in the form of Alessa, only to be revealed for the demon it truly is on the inside. Yet in Silent Hill 3, the god is made in the form of Alessa, because it's born from someone who idolized Alessa so much that she was as much of a god to her as something could be. That's what I base my interpretation on, that God is not a single defined thing, it is made in the eyes of those who believe in it. So the god is born, you shoot it with a rifle a bunch in a terrible boss fight, it dies, and the spirit of Alessa, now free, gives a new baby to Harry and he runs away as the nightmare collapses and the town goes back to normal. If you're familiar with the Silent Hill story, you'll notice I left out a bunch of stuff like what happens to Lisa the nurse, the PTV drug made from the White Claudia flower, the interactions with Kaufman, the director of the hospital, everything about Sybil, the police officer, because it's not part of the main direct story. They're very interesting and important aspects to learn about, especially Lisa, and they add a lot more to the appreciation of the Silent Hill story, but the same core story can be told even if they aren't a part of it. The dialogue and acting in early Silent Hill games is commonly joked about, especially in the original, but I gotta say there's something about the really off, unnatural way these people talk that further contributes to the uncomfortable atmosphere these games have.
Nothing is to be gained from floundering about at random. You must follow the path. The path of the hermit concealed by flowers.
What? What are you talking about?
The acting is significantly better in Silent Hill 2, but there's still an unnatural element to the performances. It makes characters hard to read at times, but you can tell something is just off about them. And I think it adds to the experience. Nothing is supposed to feel right about this place, so top-tier believable acting could come across as contradictory.
Excuse me,
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm kind of lost.
Lost?
Silent Hill was one of the first games where I really got interested in the story. Sure, I liked the mythology of Mortal Kombat and Twisted Metal growing up, but most of the games I played were just gameplay and nothing else. Metal Gear Solid made me actually care about video game characters, and then Silent Hill showed me I could fall in love with so much more. Like Metal Gear Solid, it was one of the first games to move me with its music, and actually make me cry for a character. Silent Hill made me feel just as sad for Lisa as I did for Meryl. And it was the first game to make me feel dread. It didn't make me jump like Resident Evil did, it made me terrified to move forward. And when it made me scream, it was a prolonged scream of fear and panic. I played the game several times to unlock all the endings. Like many players, I'm sure, I got the worst ending because I didn't think to explore Annie's bar and I didn't fill the plastic bottle with the aglophidus chemical, but I finally got the good ending where Harry leaves with the new baby, and that's the canonical ending. I filed Silent Hill away with the other games in my library, satisfied, never even thinking that it would get a sequel. But it did. Boy oh boy did it get a sequel. The reveal trailer for Silent Hill 2 sent me into a frenzy. I watched it over and over. The visuals were horrifying, the music was beautiful, I found myself getting emotional as I watched it. Silent Hill 2 had become my most anticipated game since Resident Evil 2. I was happy to see the return of the radio, which emits static as enemies approach. It's a perfectly tuned sound that creates tension, and can enhance the rare jump scare with its sudden piercing sound. You can also choose to play with the radio off, which is its own terrifying experience. The radio is an interesting mechanic because while it does add to the tension, one could argue that it ends up taking away from the tension for two reasons. One, it's warning you that enemies are near, which means you won't be surprised, and two, when it's not making a sound, it's telling you that you're safe, so there's nothing to be scared of. Since Silent Hill's horror doesn't primarily come from enemy encounters, I don't think the fact that the radio tells you when you're in danger ends up taking away from the experience more than it adds to it. The radio static is commonly paired with either darkness or camera angles that obscure your view, so even if you're being told that you're in danger, many times you don't know what that danger is going to be immediately. The static ends up creating a sense of anxiety. And so much of Silent Hill makes you uneasy outside of the monsters you fight. Your vision is limited due to the fog or the darkness, so you don't really know what you're walking into. I'd wager the majority of terror that players have felt in Silent Hill games has come from the unknown, the unseen, or the incomprehensible. Sounds that are heard in rooms that appear to be non-threatening, and horrific imagery that makes you not even want to try to understand what you're looking at, but at the same time you just can't look away. As a game, I absolutely loved Silent Hill 2 when it came out. But you know what? It also disappointed me. It was interesting to learn recently that I was far from alone. It eventually became my favorite in the series, but it didn't start out that way. While it's now considered a masterpiece and has been for a long time, Silent Hill 2 was not universally well received by fans. I'm gonna play a clip from a video by the Gaming Muse called There Was No Team Silent, which is a video every Silent Hill fan should see.
In 2001, Silent Hill 2, widely considered the landmark horror game title, one of the best games of all time, was released around the world. In Japan, the game was received with mild success. It would sell a third of what the first game did in its first year, 120,000 units. Fans did not like it. They complained it wasn't a sequel. They complained about the monsters being different. Reading chat rooms from the time of the release reveals a shocking amount of discontent and dislike for one of gaming's most famous horror titles. It was a major blow to KSET. Sure, it had succeeded, but Silent Hill 2 had been expensive to make. They'd used motion capture for every cutscene and actually acted the game out on a stage, a process that took 4 months. They'd allowed Sato Takayoshi to branch off and create his own digital art studio in the United States. It was so expensive his studio lost money working on Silent Hill 2 in spite of the game's success. The expenses would just keep rising while the earnings continued to fall. Silent Hill 3 would be a real sequel since that had been the complaint about 2, but it wouldn't help sales in Japan. It would only sell 90,000 units its first year.
I was one of those people. Well, not entirely. I was very happy with Silent Hill 2 as a horror game, but I too felt a lack of drive as I explored because I didn't see what any of this had to do with the original game. Silent Hill 2 is about a man looking for his wife who died 3 years ago from a disease, and he somehow got a letter from her saying she's waiting for him in Silent Hill. The entire game is about the exploration of his mind, his conscience, his guilt, learning what happened with him and his wife, and interacting with other characters that have their own personal demons to deal with. The power of this town is showing people what's inside them. Instead of the monsters coming from Alessa's nightmare, they are manifested by our main character and the other people here. Everyone sees something different. James's monsters are reflections of his wife's illness and the darkness within him. And when it was all over, when the credits rolled, I sat there saying, but what about Alessa and the cult? At the time of release, I wasn't allowing myself to enjoy the story of Silent Hill 2 because it wasn't what I wanted. It took me a while to come around on it. It truly is a fantastic piece of early 2000s video game storytelling and deserves all the praise it gets, but you can understand why some fans of the original were put off by it initially. I've always seen the events of Silent Hill 2 as the residual effect of the events of the first game. That may not be exactly what's happening, but you see the seal of Metatron on the floor of the final Pyramid Head fight, making me think Alessa came here in the first game as she spread the seal around. All those supernatural shenanigans of the first game have left the town in a state where the power has a mind of its own, and is now bringing out the worst in people. It wasn't until I replayed Silent Hill 2 completely, as part of a weekend of playing all 3 Silent Hill games before the movie came out, that I began to really appreciate the story being told, and I felt bad for not having seen it for what it was. Silent Hill 2 ultimately is an excellent story and horror experience, and it fleshes out the mythology in interesting ways, providing us with history like the cult's involvement in Civil War prison camps. And the characters are complex enough to make you want to know more about them. The music is absolutely incredible, the best in the entire series, and the art direction and creature design is simply phenomenal. The maps are a treat to explore, the puzzles are fun, and the all-new expanded areas of town are welcome additions to the world. Just like the original, it's great to replay, figuring out more and more details about the story and the lore, noting all the symbolism. And Silent Hill 2 is a game that introduced what is probably the series' most iconic location, Brookhaven Hospital, and it's massive. But this facility is mostly used for mental health. It's a small town, so I assume that people from other towns come here for treatment. This place makes you feel constantly uncomfortable, and it's the first time the game shifts into a nightmare version. This game's events aren't connected to the story of Alessa, so you're not constantly switching into a nightmare world, but it does happen eventually, far enough into the game where you don't think it's gonna happen. best location of the game is actually the prison. That's when things really start to get trippy, as you go through an opening in the historical society that leads you down an absurdly long tunnel, deep underground. Arriving at the prison, there's just no way a prison could actually be here. How much of this is actually happening, and what are the rules? Reality starts to break down as you find multiple rooms that are flipped the wrong way, and you dive further and further down, asked repeatedly if you'll take the leap into the darkness below, eventually finding yourself in an old elevator that takes you down to more absurd depths. It's so beyond reality and comprehension that it's disturbing. Something truly horrific must be waiting for you below, but you exit the elevator to find a simple wooden door. Incredibly unsettling that something so simple would be here. Descending through all these spaces is reflecting the journey our main character is making into his own psyche, his repressed memories and guilt. He has to look deep inside himself to face the truth, so in Silent Hill, he must literally go down into the ground. What a wonderful series of events, and all of it for you to just exit back on the surface. The level design and psychological adventure you experience in Silent Hill 2 is why it's so beloved. It's unmatched, but story, themes, and level design aren't everything. The combat from Silent Hill 1 to Silent Hill 2 took a significant downturn. Combat controls feel like total crap compared to the first game, and judging this game on the normal difficulty, enemies are laughably easy. Despite the starting wooden plank being awkward as hell to use, enemies tend to just stand there and let you kill them. 3 or 4 hits and they're down. You can just walk around killing everything in the apartments no problem, and then you'll have so much ammo that you're just wiping out the entire hospital effortlessly. It's the one area where I think Silent Hill 2 truly fails in its game design. I'm not saying Silent Hill 1 didn't have its share of bad balance as well, but this is the big sequel. I expect more. And normally I would say the answer to this is to play it on hard. Enemies are much more difficult to deal with, you'll take a lot of damage if you're haphazardly trying to run past enemies, and honestly it makes 95% of the experience way better. But due to some hilariously bad boss balancing, the end of the game is nearly unpassable. It's like it's a joke or something. They are the most unfun, frustrating, infuriating boss fights I've seen in my entire life. We're talking hundreds of pistol and shotgun rounds emptied into these bosses while running back and forth from corner to corner for 20 minutes to half an hour, die and start all over again, followed by the final boss fight right after, where you will run out of ammo by this point and you have to run around the room for literally half an hour to trigger a programmed auto kill on her. It is absolutely abysmal game design. It makes hard mode unrecommendable to anyone because you just won't be able to finish it, meaning I have to recommend people to play it on normal, and that's not a great experience either because it's so forgiving. That's why Silent Hill 2 is certainly not perfect. It's got a wonky camera and tight spaces. There are some annoying pacing issues, like when you run all the way up Nathan Avenue just to see it's broken and then you run all the way back. The first boss fight with Pyramid Head, where you just run away, is thematically perfect, but actually playing it is quite tedious and boring. It's got problems, but that just shows you how great everything else is. This game speaks to people on a level that most games could only dream of. I can play it over and over just to go through the experience of passing through these horrific and compelling spaces, following this man's journey through his own soul, and just do it on the normal difficulty. Yeah, I wish certain aspects of the gameplay were much better than they are, but they don't keep me from loving Silent Hill 2 for what it is. And unfortunately, my initial disappointment with the story of Silent Hill 2, which was shared by many vocal fans at the time, was likely responsible for the change in direction that happened in Silent Hill 3, as that game was originally never supposed to be a follow-up to the original game's story, as it ended up being. It was going to follow the Silent Hill 2 direction and tell a personal story, but company pressure led to the creative team changing it into the story of the baby from the end of Silent Hill 1, now grown up, and being summoned back to the town to complete the Birth of God ritual, because now she has the god inside of her. It's a fun story, I loved it when it came out. It has one of my favorite moments in the series where the protagonist Heather comes home to find her father, Harry from the first game, murdered. It's followed by a scary boss fight on the roof, and I like the story of Claudia, the current leader of the cult and old friend and admirer of Alessa, using Heather's rage to lure her back to the town. Story bits give further context to the characters and events of the first game that enhance our understanding and enjoyment of it. The parts where you actually end up in locations from Silent Hill 1, like the amusement park and the elementary school, are super satisfying in a nostalgic way. It has the goriest and most twisted imagery in the series, and the music, again, is amazing. Graphically and artistically, Silent Hill 3 is pretty much perfect, and they go for a dirtier, more disgusting feel to the nightmare world this time. The game has some of my absolute favorite moments, like when Heather's reflection becomes corrupted and you're locked in the room to watch it, climbing up the ladder while looking at this, opening the locker to find this, whatever the hell this is behind the glass. Silent Hill 3's imagery makes it the memorable game it is to me more than anything else. One thing that keeps Silent Hill 3 feeling fresh is the change in location. Since Heather is living somewhere else, when the god inside her is awoken, the nightmare corrupts this new place. We get to explore a shopping mall, which is one of my favorite maps in the series. We work our way through a confusing subway station, which is based on the subway from Jacob's Ladder. The main character even lives on Bergen Street, just like Heather does. You can see the same chained up doors and everything. And hey, he's wearing James's green army jacket. Seriously, you gotta see Jacob's Ladder if you're a Silent Hill fan. So you're spending half the game outside of Silent Hill just trying to get home, as the world is corrupting around you. I thought that was a really original idea when I played it, and it makes the eventual return to Silent Hill really exciting. You get that, oh yeah baby, we're going back feeling because it's been built up to. Instead of building a whole new part of the map, they used the Silent Hill 2 map, which feels totally justified. You even go back to Brookhaven Hospital, though things play out a bit differently this time. The amusement park leads you to one of the best sequences in the game, a trip through the Borley Haunted Mansion. There's something truly unsettling about this location. It's an old 70s cheesy haunted house, not scary in the least, but it's in the nightmare world of Silent Hill, so you know there are actual horrible things happening, and you're questioning reality anyway. It's just so weird and creepy walking through a place that's set up to be a fun scare house under these circumstances. Though the insta-kill traps are quite frustrating and lead to repeating sections, which ends up destroying the scariness. Overall, Silent Hill 3 is a satisfying game, a welcome entry in the series with many strengths. But it could have been more. It could have been another fascinating dive into the mind of a troubled person. Instead, we got a follow-up to the cult storyline, with an ending that just kind of feels like, okay, I guess it's over now, let's go home. The mentality I had that was shared by some OG fans of the first game is responsible for that, and I feel bad about it. Silent Hill 3, because it went back to the cult story and for other reasons like its presentation of horror, was why it was my favorite for the longest time. As I've gotten older, 2 has taken the top spot, and even though I know 3 could have been something much better than what it turned out to be, it still has a special place in my heart. It's the first one where I started really listening to the music, and when Silent Hill 4 actually came out with a soundtrack CD, I was inspired to order the other 3 soundtracks on eBay, and I listened obsessively for years. Going back and replaying Silent Hill 3 for this video for the first time in many years, I'm still blown away by how amazing of a horror experience it is. No other game, in my opinion, has even come close to replicating the horrific nightmare that's seen in this game's environments. Even though I've been here several times, I was consistently on the edge of my seat. It's so effective at causing fear and anxiety that it almost excuses how bad the combat feels on the hard difficulty. Because it is quite bad. The final boss, just like Silent Hill 2, is terribly balanced and so unfun to fight that it's again impossible to recommend the hard difficulty setting, even though it makes so much more of the game better. The boss fight against Leonard on the hard difficulty may be the worst boss fight I've ever played. Silent Hill 3 has way more camera issues with how much of the game takes place in tight corridors, with multiple enemies surrounding you. There's just a lot more claustrophobic combat situations, and the camera doesn't help. The Nightmare Hospital really is a nightmare when you're being constantly attacked by monsters on the ground and you don't even know where you're going. Silent Hill 2's spaces felt much better designed for its combat. The hard difficulty setting for puzzles in Silent Hill 3 is also insane to the point of feeling like a troll from the developers. The very first puzzle is unsolvable for anyone who isn't knowledgeable of several works of Shakespeare. If you don't know these 5 Shakespearean stories, then fuck you apparently. It's absurd. The last thing I'll say about the classics is that I have always been fascinated by the face models. Many characters in the original games have this really odd similarity in their facial features. You could just look at a character, not knowing if they're in a Silent Hill game, and you'd be able to guess that they are just by looking at their face. It gave characters a really eerie vibe. Whether this was an artistic limitation or a conscious decision, it just adds another layer of oddness to the games. From here, I don't know how much more there is to say. I'm not much of a fan of the games that followed. The best part of Silent Hill 4 was the trailer for it. It's a mess of a game. It feels like half a Silent Hill game, and therefore half of a good game. It feels like it was made by people who didn't want to make a Silent Hill game, or just didn't enjoy making it, or didn't know what to do. I played it once, 1.5 times, and I just don't like it very much, gameplay or story, though it does have some good maps and good horror moments. It gets a pass, and that's more than I can say for the rest. Every other Silent Hill game developed by studios outside the Japanese development at Konami, Silent Hill Origins all the way through Downpour, ranged from less than decent to insultingly bad. And they all seem to go out of their way to try to screw up the story and mythology as much as possible. Pyramid Head, a creature that should have only been seen by Silent Hill 2's protagonist, appears in Silent Hill Homecoming because, well, he appeared in the movie for no reason too, so I guess we can just treat him like the Jason Voorhees of Silent Hill and ruin everything that made him special. Silent Hill Origins messes up how the nightmare works by turning it into an ever-present alternate dimension. Shattered Memories has nothing to do with Silent Hill at all, literally nothing. It shouldn't even be called Silent Hill, and Downpour was the most miserable gaming experience of my life. There's so much wrong with that game, technically, gameplay-wise, story-wise, and its childish concept of what horror is. I wish I'd never played it. Like Book of Memories, I never played it. It's gonna stay that way. For those of you wishing I would go into all the other Silent Hill games and just rip into them, I'm not gonna do that. I don't want this video to turn into a bunch of negativity, and I'd rather just forget about them. Let's keep it focused on the original games, the ones I love. Aside from the games, I'm not a fan of the movie because its story is incoherent and it gets the story and characters completely wrong, and any tension the movie builds up is constantly ruined by cutting away from the main character's perspective to follow her husband around in the real world. It just doesn't work, though it has some cool effects. And the second movie is just funny, though I do get a nerdy kick out of seeing parts of Silent Hill 3 recreated and seeing video game maps. Now a Silent Hill 2 remake is about to come out, and there's a bunch more Silent Hill material on the way. I don't know what to make of it. I'm very skeptical about all of it. I hope something good comes from it. I'll be thrilled if it does. So that's my experience with Silent Hill. I hope you've enjoyed this journey. Maybe you learned something, maybe you related to something, maybe you just had this on in the background while you made dinner. Doesn't matter. Thanks for watching. You can count on me to cover the big Silent Hill and Resident Evil releases in the future, since I'm a big fan and I love talking about them. See you again soon.